acquire these resources without
Well,
overtaxing them.
Right, well, you know, the greatest issue is how do you have a free society where government needs to be funded, and the very notion of a tax is a compulsory taking. Certainly, it seems to me that in a free society, there could be a wider array of user fees for various services rendered by a government. You go to, let's suppose, a civil dispute in a court of law. Well, the parties would perhaps have to cover the expenses of the adjudication of the dispute. In fact, in the United States, there's a whole array. In fact, there are more private arbitration courts than civil dispute courts run by some level of government. And the private participants in these private adjudication procedures, in fact, agree to pay the expenses of the judge and the facility where the dispute is held, and the judge hears the evidence and makes his ruling, etc. The other thing is that, again, if you could go back 100 years to the United States, again, 1911, let's say, and before this huge growth in government intervention, regulation, redistribution, what you'd find is that, using my own country as an example, all levels of government, that is the national or federal government, the state governments, the local municipal governments, all levels of government combined only took about 5% of national income and taxes, which meant that the citizenry kept in their pockets 95 cents out of every dollar that they earned. In the United States today, if you add up all levels of taxation, direct and indirect, it probably, on average, comes out to between 50 and 60% of all income earned in the United States is taxed by the government. Now, when the government had more limited functions back then, no welfare state, very few regulatory agencies at that point that had been established, it seems to me is that what you could do is have a system of taxes such as the United States had at the time. It had a low, non-protective, but revenue import tax, which is like a sales tax on imported goods. It had a variety of what they called excise taxes for tobacco, alcohol. Of course, the United States at that time also had, as it still has, a lot of open land. It actually got revenues from selling land. Obviously, not every country can do that. But it seems to me is that even if you needed to have other sources, you could have a very low national sales tax. Or even if, as in the United States and many other countries, you have an income tax, and it was found it to be difficult to eliminate the income tax, it seems to me that you could have a very low flat income tax. If, let's say, again, if it's the size of government that I'm talking about, a low flat income tax. In other words, whether you make $100,000 a year or $10,000 a year, you pay 2% of your income, which means the wealthy person is still paying more, because 2% of 100,000 is more than 2% of 10,000. That you would just do it with a very low flat tax or a very low sales tax. What is burdensome today and makes the taxing system egregious and often seem unfair, unjust, abused, is precisely because government has to tax so much to undertake so many government activities. If the government had less duties, functions, and responsibilities, and therefore the scope and the size of government was radically reduced, then the government needs less money to collect to fund those activities. I could easily, I don't know what the tax structure here is in the Bahamas, but I assume that you or your parents pay taxes. Just imagine if the Bahamian government was more or less reduced to the smaller size that I'm talking about. And then imagine that equivalently, your taxes were reduced that much. Wouldn't there be more money in your family's pockets? I would think so. I would think so. So that in a situation that is involving a smaller government, as I'm talking about, what type of tax becomes less important than the fact that it only has to be a very low tax so that it doesn't infringe upon people's ability to improve themselves, to save, invest, send their families to school, plan their retirement, think of private insurance coverage to take care of their medical and related expenses, and the market's ability to then provide these things. But the nutshell would be is that some user taxes, excise taxes, which are basically sales taxes, or either a flat.
And he basically talks about how, in terms of the opulent few, they seek to gain wealth and power at the expense of the masses. And the interesting chapter, it's called Manufacturing Consent. And he talks about how the opulent few, they manipulate our minds through media messages and propaganda. So he puts it in a way where he terms like we have the freedom, the choice of freedom that is essentially manufactured through their messages, and they kind of paint the way that we see things through the media and, you know.
Well, I think that the way that Chomsky even titles the book is that, you see, I view profit as a good. And in fact, it's an indicator of satisfying and helping other people. How do you make a profit in the marketplace? You're all majoring in business, right? A lot of you, these business majors. How do you profit in business? By making a product that others are willing to buy, which you hope will be at a price higher than the cost that it is taking you to manufacture or supply it. Is that correct? I mean, that's the bottom line. Okay. Now, why are they willing to pay that? Because they value it enough. How do you make a profit? By making the products that others value. You know very well that you wouldn't make a product that was going to intentionally cause you a loss. You would not consciously make a product that, okay, this is my labor cost, this is my capital cost, machinery, tools, equipment, these are my other costs like the electricity and the phone. I'm adding up all my costs, but consumers don't value this product very highly, and if I made it, I would only generate a revenue from selling it to them that would be less than what my cost of manufacturing would be. Would you intentionally make such a product? Nobody consciously tries to make a loss. Now that's saying is that the consumers don't want that product enough to cover the cost of its production. So what products do businessmen make? They make the products that consumers value greater than the cost of manufacturing. That itself is an indicator that the businessman cannot make money, cannot make his profit margin, whether greater or smaller, unless he produces that which consumers in the society desire. Now, why does labor cost that much? Why does the machine and the equipment to purchase or rent or hire cost that much? Because there are other businessmen also competing for their hire, their purchase, their renting, to make other products that they think consumers might be willing to buy, that they're anticipating could be sold at a price enough to cover those costs. So the factor prices, land, labor, capital, have the values in the market they do because they reflect all businessmen's views of what consumers want and what it would be worth to pay for the resources to manufacture them. The very nature of a market economy is that it is driven by the wishes and demands and desires of the consumers. There's no other way to make a profit in the market. As I said in that earlier example, you never go into a shoe store, to use that just as an instance, and if you're wanting to walk out because you don't think the shoe is worth the price, the guy at the door says you're not leaving until you buy it. You are the king in the marketplace. The businessman is the servant. Now, we see wealthy people in the society. Let's think of some. Okay, you have now a beautiful new library, and I noticed over there that you have a bank of computers for students to use. Now, they may have been made by one company or another, but many of these computers are the result of people such as Bill Gates of Microsoft or Steve Jobs of Apple. These people are zillionaires. Who has made these athletes wealthy? You. You like to watch them on television. You like to go to the stadium and see them live. And the team has considered that they are valuable enough to pay this price because they attract the customers to either watching it or sitting in the seats to see someone perform this sport with that excellence. So if the sportsman comes away with the hundreds of thousands of dollar contracts, the millions of dollars contracts, as some professional sportsmen do in a whole variety of different sports, it's because we have chosen to pay that money. They're wealthy because they make us feel good. We like watching them.